This is your slide lecture summary for Part 5A. The Romantic era sprang from the social and political upheavals that followed the French Revolution. The height of the Romantic era was during the second quarter of the 19th century. The French Revolution was a consequence of the clash between the old and the new political and social order. As a result, power was transferred from the aristocracy to the middle class. The slogan of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity, was inspirational to the artists of the time. Sympathy for the oppressed manifested itself in works that centered on peasants, workers, and children, as well as faith in humankind and its destiny. As a reaction to the rational ideals of the 18th century, Romantic poets and artists emphasized intense emotional expression through passionate, fanciful, or picturesque subject matter. Individuality of style was sought after. I am different from all the men I have seen. If I am not better, at least I am different. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Society in the Romantic era was indifferent to artistic and cultural values, causing artists to feel more isolated. Thus, the Bohemian artist emerged, a rejected dreamer who starved in substandard living accommodations with a non-conventional manner of dress and behavior. They were pessimistic artists whose emotions were fed by regret for the lost happiness of childhood and the disenchantment with their current reality. Many well-known novelists, writers, and poets were active during this era. The Industrial Revolution resulted in a rise in affordable, quality musical instruments. Technical improvements, as well as the invention of new instruments, gave composers a palette for musical expression that was previously unknown. Some of these improvements included the addition of valves to brass instruments for greater flexibility in motion, and providing the piano with a cast iron frame and thicker strings for a deeper and more brilliant tone. As a result of democratization, educational opportunities were broadened, which led to a rise in new music conservatories that were able to train more and better musicians. Thus, composers could count on performers with considerably more advanced skills than in the past. Orchestras increased in size, expanding dynamic capacity. Also, new instruments such as the piccolo, English horn, and contrabassoon were introduced, which extended the high and low ranges and added a variety of new timbres. New levels of expression, such as increased dynamic range from very loud, triple F, to very soft, triple P, added new drama to the music, and orchestration became an art form in itself. In order to communicate their expressive intent with more precision, composers adopted a more expansive vocabulary of expressive terms. National idioms were created as composers made increasing use of folk songs and dances from their native lands. Among the more well-established nationalistic styles were Hungarian, Polish, Russian, Bohemian, Scandinavian, and eventually American. Exoticism is a musical style in which rhythms, melodies, or instruments evoke the color and atmosphere of far-off lands. This trend became prominent in many Western composers were inspired by the culture of Asia and the Far East and Russia. German and French composers became inspired by the cultures of Italy and Spain. Era melodies were marked by lyricism, lending immediate appeal, as the instrumentalists would also strive to play them in a singing style. Themes from romantic symphonies, concertos, and other instrumental works were often used in popular songs, and indeed were popular among the general public of the day. Romantic era harmonies were made highly expressive through the use of more chromaticism and dissonance than previously. Also, composers expanded on instrumental forms, increasing the amount of time required for performance of such works as symphonies, which before averaged 20 minutes and now range from 40 minutes to even an hour. Composers' output was significantly decreased in general, because now composers wrote with more deliberation in an endeavor to achieve individuality of style. Haydn, of the classical era, wrote over 100 symphonies, Mozart more than 40. Schubert, Dvorak, and Beethoven wrote 9, and Schumann and Brahms only 4 each. 19th century musicians were reliant on both the middle-class audience and the aristocracy for support, causing their venues to range from the public concert hall to a private salon. In the spirit of the ever-increasing establishment of a democratic society, musicians were considered as equals with the audience. Popular soloists and conductors were even idolized by the public, such being the case with conductor Felix Mendelssohn, pianist Franz Liszt, and violinist Niccolò Paganini. Women made great strides in the 19th century in the establishment of careers as professional musicians in teaching and performance, because they were able to receive training as singers, instrumentalists, and compose in the public conservatories. Although the field of composition was dominated by men, a few women were able to become successful composers. Among these were Fanny Mendelssohn and Clara Schumann. A number of women were also able to play significant roles as patrons of music. Among these were Aurora Dudevant, who supported Chopin, Princess Caroline Sayn-Wittgenstein, who supported Franz Liszt, and Nadezhda von Meck, who supported Tchaikovsky. The art song was a means of immediate personal expression in the 19th century. In the 19th century, 2 song structures were prevalent: strophic form, in which the same melody is repeated with each stanza or strophe of poem or text, and through composed forms, in which there are no repetitions of whole sections. In through composed songs, the music follows the storyline. A combination of the features of the 2 forms resulted in what is considered to be modified strophic form. The Lied, plural Lieder, is a German text art song of solo voice, usually with piano accompaniment. It is a fusion of poetry and music that originated in the Romantic era. Masters of the Lied included Franz Schubert, Robert Schumann, Johannes Brahms, Hugo Wolf, Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel, and Clara Schumann. Cycle is a group of lieder that are unified by a storyline or descriptive theme that conveys feelings of love, longing, or appreciation for the beauty of nature. The popularity of the Lied as a form amongst composers was inspired by the deluge of lyric poetry from German Romantic masters, such as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe and Heinrich Heine. Another circumstance that served to perpetuate the Lied as an art form was the emergence of the piano as the preferred household instrument of the century. The piano accompaniment to the Lied embodies the translation of the poetic images into music. The Lied was a form suitable for amateur and professional musicians, finding audience in the home as well as in the concert hall. Franz Schubert was born outside of Vienna and served in his youth as one of the famous Vienna Boys Choir. He achieved mastery of music at a very young age. He was socially shy, known as a songwriter. One of his friends noted that everything he touched turned to song. His small group of friends included writers, artists, and musicians who organized a series of concerts known as Schubertiades, where his newest works could be heard. He achieved public recognition through his song Erlking, which he wrote as a teenager, but had trouble finding a publisher for his later works. He suffered from syphilis and died at the age of 31. His dying wish was to be buried near Beethoven, which he was granted. Schubert's music exhibits both classical and romantic traits. His chamber music is classical in its use of clear form, and his short piano works exhibit the characteristic lyricism of the Romantic era. His output of songs is prolific, more than 600, most written at lightning speed with accompaniments descriptive of the poetry. He also wrote 9 symphonies, 7 masses, operas, and chamber music of various types. His total output approaches 900 works. Is based on a poem by Goethe that is based on the legend that whoever is touched by the King of Elves must die. The urgency of the atmosphere is established by the piano accompaniment through the use of the persistent triplets as a father rides through the night on horseback holding his sick son. There are 4 characters sung by one singer. Each melodic line is in a different register in order to foster the illusion of 4 different voices. Listen for a wide-ranging melody, each character's voice sung at a different range. The constant triplets in the piano until the last line gives the piece a lilting feel. Shifting from minor to major harmonies for the elf king. Dissonance used to project the terror of the child. A through-composed form with a fast tempo to create a mood of urgency and drama. Robert Schumann was a German composer and music critic. He established a publication called Neue Zeitschrift für Musik, the New Journal of Music. He courted and married in 1840 the daughter of his former piano teacher against her father's wishes. She was a well-established concert pianist who was a chief interpreter of his piano works. He suffered from auditory hallucinations and psychotic behavior, which led to a suicide attempt, after which he was institutionalized. He declined into dementia and died at the age of 46. His music is marked by passionate melodies, innovative harmonies, and driving rhythmic patterns. He frequently attached literary meanings to his piano music and composed a number of cycles of short pieces connected by one theme or motto. Schumann was a major contributor to the genre of Lieder, favoring the texts of Heine, writing several song cycles, including A Poet's Love, Dichte Liebe. Schumann wrote his song cycle Dichte Liebe, A Poet's Love, which is built upon a set of 16 poems chosen from the works of Heinrich Heine in 1840 at lightning-fast speed. In the Lovely Month of May is the first song in the cycle, in strophic form, and conveys the idea of the fragility of new love. In the Lovely Month of May is written for solo voice and piano. Listen for a winding melodic line set syllabically. Rhythmically, the piano moves somewhat freely in rising lines. The harmony is meandering. The tonic lacks resolution, and the form is strophic. With regard to musical expression, you may notice instances of text painting. The rise and the popularity of the piano shaped the musical culture of the Romantic era. It was the instrument of choice for the home and was also a favorite instrument of virtuosos. Technical improvements to the piano in the 19th century led to the development of the modern concert grand piano. At the Paris exhibition of 1867, American manufacturer Steinway, maker of some of today's finest pianos, took top awards. The short lyric piano piece was the equivalent to the art song in its projection of dramatic moods. Composers used imaginative titles for these works, such as Prelude, Intermezzo, Impromptu, Mazurka, Polonaise, Waltz, and Scherzo. These titles often suggest free improvisational forms or dance-related music. The composers listed here were among the masters of the short piano piece: Schubert, Chopin, Liszt, Felix Mendelssohn, Fanny Mendelssohn-Hensel, Robert and Clara Schumann, and Brahms. Their works explored the technical resources of the piano, enabled the realization of its full potential for expression, and epitomized the romantic ideal for instrumental music of a song without words. Chopin's father was French, and his mother was Polish. He left Warsaw after studying briefly at the Conservatory of Warsaw to spend the rest of his career in Paris. Chopin's circle of friends included the leading composers, writers, and artists in France, as well as the German poet Heinrich Heine. Through pianist Franz Liszt, he met the novelist George Sand, also known as Madame Aurora Dudevant, with whom he had an affair for a number of years. They eventually parted ways. Chopin died of tuberculosis in Paris at the age of 39. The artistic world mourned his loss. George Sand left this memorable account of Chopin at work. Quote, "His creative power was spontaneous, miraculous. It came to him without effort or warning. But then began the most heart-rending labor I have ever witnessed." Unquote. Chopin's works were centered on the piano. His smaller forms included nocturnes, preludes, impromptus, waltzes, mazurkas, and etudes. His larger forms included ballades, polonaises, fantasies, sonatas, and piano concertos. Mazurka in B-flat minor, Opus 24, No. 4, was one of a set of 4 written in 1833. The mazurka originated in Chopin's home district of Mazovia, Poland. It is a lively dance in triple meter with accents on the second or third beat of the measure. Listen for chromatic, disjunct, wide-ranging melodic lines with a dance-like dotted rhythmic figure. Shifts occur harmonically between major and minor. Modal harmonies and chromaticism are also used frequently. The texture is mostly homophonic with a quarter note accompaniment in the left hand. The overall form is A, B, A, C, D, A, with some repetition of sections followed by a long coda. Rubato and heavy accents are employed to enhance musical expression. Fanny Mendelssohn was born into a highly cultured family and was especially close to her younger brother, conductor and composer Felix Mendelssohn. She received instruction in piano, music theory, and composition, but was discouraged from pursuing a music career, being told by her father that she should pursue, quote, "the only calling for a young woman, that of housewife," end quote. Felix felt the same way, but eventually he approved of her publishing her own music. She married court artist Wilhelm Hensel and had one son. She continued to perform, compose, and participate in Sunday concerts at the Mendelssohn residence. Fanny died suddenly of an apoplectic stroke on May 13, 1847. Felix died just 6 months later after a series of strokes. Fanny Mendelssohn Hensel's primary output was that of lieder, choral part songs, and piano music, although she wrote several large-scale works, including a piano trio and a string quartet. Most of her compositions were intended for performance at Sunday music gatherings at the Mendelssohn residence. Her piano music demonstrated her strong interest in the contrapuntal procedures of J.S. Bach. The Year, Das Jahr, is a set of 12 character pieces. The manuscript, in her own hand, was uncovered in 1989 and features different colored paper for each month. Each miniature work is prefaced by a programmatic epigram and a painting done by her husband, Wilhelm Hensel. September at the River is accompanied by a drawing of a barefooted woman by the stream and several poetic lines by Goethe, quote, "Flow, flow, dear river, never will I be happy," end quote. This cycle of works was never published in its entirety. The movement was the only one included in her collection of piano works, but appeared without its literary and visual details. Listen for a slow-paced melody in the middle range of the piano against fast-moving, churning notes and chromaticism. The rhythm consists of constant running 16th notes in 6/8 time with some use of rubato. The piece begins and ends in B minor, modulating through various distant keys in the middle. The texture is polyphonic. The melodies are slow-moving with fast-moving lines and chords in the accompaniment. The form is ternary, with a short introduction and coda, and the musical expression results from the use of rubato, swelling, and decrescendos in the dynamics, which evoke the flow of the river. Music publications in 18th and early 19th century America were imported from Europe and devotional in nature for the most part. Some were written in an easy system of notation called the shape note system. Louis Moreau Gottschalk, America's first great classical pianist and composer, and Stephen Foster, who was known for his parlor ballads, show tunes, and plantation songs, were the forerunners of America's musical tradition. Stephen Foster was often considered America's first great songwriter. Born in Pennsylvania, he eventually moved to Cincinnati, where he wrote his first song, "Oh, Susanna." Early works were written for minstrel shows, which were popular during this era. These songs conveyed the deep-felt emotions and sufferings of African slaves. Foster wrote "Beautiful Dreamer" in the style of an Italian air while in New York after separating from his wife. He became an alcoholic and died from a fall in his hotel room at the age of 37. Stephen Foster was one of the first Americans to make a living as a professional songwriter. His songs evoke themes of lost youth and happiness. Although he did not spend much time in the South, he wrote "My Old Kentucky Home," which is currently the state song of Kentucky. Foster's classic ballad, "Jeannie with the Light Brown Hair," was written in 1853 and 54, just after he separated from his wife. In his sketchbook, the original title was not Jeannie, but Jenny, drawn from Jane Denny McDowell's name. The tone is bittersweet, wishing for days gone by. The song, like most of Foster's, is strophic and set for solo voice and piano, thereby meeting the growing need for piano music appropriate for amateurs. Listen for a wave-like melody and syllabic setting of the text. The tempo is moderate in broad quadruple meter with a free ascending cadenza in each verse. The harmony is major with a simple block and broken chord accompaniment. The texture is homophonic with some polyphony in a duet section. The form of the song is strophic with each verse in A-A-B-A song form. It is performed by two soprano voices who sing in alternation, then in duet, accompanied by a hammer dulcimer. The text is a two-verse poem by the composer. Seeing extraordinary energy on display is one of the compelling aspects of live performance, especially when there is a single performer. The outwardly effortless delivery of technical and expressive music by a soloist can seem supernatural. The piano was an important domestic instrument in the 19th century. The era also saw the rise of the star soloist. Franz Liszt created the public solo piano recital, something that today remains a vital part of concert life. Liszt was fascinated by the technical possibilities of the piano, and, after seeing the violinist virtuoso Paganini, he decided to model his career after him. Liszt played from memory, with the piano parallel to the stage, as it continues to be today, so that the performer was in full view. He contributed to the repertory by writing dazzling technical pieces, but also championed the works of others. Audiences went wild for him, triggering Listomania that made him famous. A native of New Orleans who traveled widely, Gottschalk was the first American to achieve international fame as a classical composer. As a child, he absorbed the West Indian and African American traditions of Congo Square. In the 1840s, he traveled to France to study, and while there received rave reviews for his recitals. Gottschalk returned to the United States in 1853 and toured extensively throughout the Americas. In his compositions, Gottschalk liked to take popular or folk melodies and elaborate them with complex virtuosic accompaniment. This both represented and fostered the overlap between high and low art. Gottschalk was born in New Orleans and made his formal concert debut at age 11. He traveled to Paris to study and concerted there to rave reviews. Upon returning to the Americas, Gottschalk toured extensively, also working in Cuba, Puerto Rico, and other Caribbean islands. At the start of the Civil War, in 1861, Gottschalk again returned to the United States and was a supporter of the Union Army. He spent the last 4 years of his life in South America. Throughout his career, Gottschalk toured the Americas and Europe promoting classical and popular music. Gottschalk's piano work, the banjo, features syncopated rhythms and jagged melodies that simulate banjo techniques. The banjo was the most popular African-American instrument in the mid-19th century, and Gottschalk certainly heard it in Congo Square in New Orleans. The instrument was also associated with minstrel shows. The banjo is an example of Gottschalk work that blends European high art with soundscapes understood as American. Program music is instrumental music that has literary or pictorial associations. Absolute or pure music, as distinguished from program music, consists of musical patterns that have no literary or pictorial meanings. Program music became prevalent in the 19th century as musicians desired to connect their art with the moral and political issues of the time, just as in poetry and painting. An example of program music is Berlioz's Witches' Sabbath from his Symphonie Fantastique. There are 4 main types of program music as follows. The concert overture is a single movement concert piece for orchestra, not associated with an opera, but based on a literary idea. One example is Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture. Incidental music often consists of an overture and a number of pieces to be performed between the acts of a play and during important scenes. Film music and background music are also forms of incidental music. A program symphony is a multi-movement programmatic orchestral work such as Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. A symphonic poem, also known as a tone poem, is a one-movement work for orchestra in which contrasting sections develop a poetic idea, suggest a scene, or create a mood. It differs from the concert overture in its flexibility in structure and form. Berlioz was a French composer and conductor. In Paris, the French Romantic movement was brewing, and Berlioz became associated with the Young France camp, along with poet Victor Hugo and painter Eugene Delacroix. He was enamored with the works of Beethoven and Shakespeare and became smitten with Shakespearean actress Harriet Smithson, who he eventually courted and married. Year after year, he strove to win the Prix de Rome, the most coveted prize in Paris, and was finally successful in 1830. Berlioz's works were predominantly programmatic, favoring the literary influences of the Romantic era. His sources included Goethe, Lord Byron, and Shakespeare. His instrumental music output included program symphonies such as his celebrated work Symphonie Fantastique, and concert overtures such as King Lear, which was inspired by Shakespeare's work. His vocal music included choral music, operas, and sacred works such as a Requiem Mass. Berlioz's originality and daring use of instrumental combinations and sounds earned him the moniker, the creator of the modern orchestra. Berlioz wrote Symphonie Fantastique at the age of 27. The story was drawn from his personal life. In the score, he describes a young musician of morbid sensibility and ardent imagination in lovesick despair who has poisoned himself with opium. The drug, too weak to kill, purges him into a heavy sleep accompanied by strange visions. The beloved one becomes herself for him a melody, a recurrent theme that haunts him everywhere. Follow the listening guide for the 4th movement of this monumental work. Symphonie Fantastique is in 5 movements with a recurring theme called idée fixe, or fixed idea. The idée fixe represents the beloved, and the theme undergoes transformation as the work progresses. In the 4th movement, March to the Scaffold, he dreams that he has killed his beloved and that he has been condemned to die and is being led to the scaffold. At the very end of the fixed idea reappears for an instant, like a last thought of love interrupted by the fall of the blade. Listen for 2 main march themes, A and B, which are strongly accented. The movement is in duple meter and set in minor mode. It is in a sonata-like form with 2 themes introduced, which are developed, then reappear in a recapitulation. With regard to musical expression, the diabolical mood is created through the use of the sudden dynamic changes, the theme of the beloved played as a clarinet solo, and the sudden chord, which is the beheading. The instruments are used in unusual ranges, and the timpani is more prominent in this movement than usual. Political conditions in 19th century Europe encouraged the growth of nationalism. Composers expressed nationalism in a variety of ways. Some based music on songs and dances of their people. Dramatic works were based on folklore or peasant life. Works were celebrating national heroes, historic events, or scenic beauty. Because of this, nationalism often had political implications. Sometimes nationalistic works were even banned. Edvard Grieg stands out for his ability to capture the essence of Norway's folklore and dance through music. Grieg was born in Norway and attended the Leipzig Conservatory in Germany. After his studies, he returned to Norway to promote his native music through an academy he helped found. Grieg received a stipend from the Norwegian government, which allowed him to focus on composition. His goal was to create art accessible to all the public, and he became an international figure, notable for his lyricism and use of folk music and dances. Henrik Ibsen's play, Peer Gynt, was based on a moralistic Norwegian folk tale. It premiered in 1867. Peer is a lazy youth who is a scoundrel with women, abducting and seducing them. One of these women girls is the daughter of the Mountain King, whose sisters vow to avenge her. Peer becomes a fugitive and takes up with a girl he once loved. But he eventually heads off for more adventures for many years, including cavorting with an Arabian girl, Anitra. He returns home many years later to find that Solveig, now a middle-aged woman, is still faithful to him. Grieg composed 22 pieces as incidental music for the play. He later extracted 8 of them and created 2 4-movement suites. Morning Mood is an atmospheric depiction of sunrise. In the Hall of the Mountain King is a grotesque ballet music as the troll daughters of the Mountain King, chase Peer. Both pieces have been used in many films, commercials, and for other purposes.